Hi, and welcome back. Now that I have introduced you to the concept of the division of responsibility, I'm sure that your mind is like a little bit overwhelmed. I know that for me, the thought of allowing my child to decide whether she was going to eat and how much she was going to eat and completely letting her be in charge of that was really scary. And so I completely understand if you're hearing this idea and you're thinking that there's no way that this is going to work, or I have no idea how I could possibly implement this. Please know that I'm just introducing you to the concept, and as we continue going through all these layers, I am going to give you some very concrete um, steps that you can take to make these changes and kind of to implement this whole division of responsibility. Um, for now, as you are kind of learning all of this, I would say that your first step would be to really look at that feeding dynamics relationship piece of who is feeding this child, when are they eating, where are they eating, are we eating together as a family, and if you can, try to have as many meals as possible with your child together, even if you are just sitting with them at the table and having a cup of tea, while they have their snack. That it actually will slowly start to set the stage for more that's going to come. So if you want something to kind of start to do that's just gentle, try to eat as many meals you can together with your child, as a family, or even just one parent with the child, and share a snack and have breakfast together, dinner together, etc. So there's two things that I wanted to kind of touch on in this video. The first one is trust, and the second one is pressure. Okay, so trust is really important piece. It's actually huge. The whole relationship that I've talked about this relationship, right? A good relationship clearly is rooted in respect and trust. Your child has to trust that you are going to do your jobs in this relationship. You are going to decide what we're going to eat. You're going to prepare meals and snacks. You're going to serve them. You're going to decide when we're having them. You're going to have a place for us to eat them, like where we're having them. And you're going to do so very consistently, reliably, and you're going to show up and you're going to do this job. Okay? And you have to trust that your child is going to decide whether or not they're going to eat and how much. And that is the part that gets moms and parents. That trust part. How do you let go and how do you trust that your child is actually going to eat enough when right now you're seeing that they're not eating enough, they're under eating, they're so picky and difficult, and in your view they're not taking in enough nutrients and you're worried. How do we get there? So it helped me tremendously to just know a little bit of the background research behind trust and children's ability to regulate how much they eat. It helped me to trust the process of letting go a little bit. So I wanted to just share a couple tidbits of a few things that stood out to me that helped me kind of be at ease a little bit more about it. And really, this whole method is rooted in trust. You have to trust them and they have to trust you. And it's 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 one of the hardest parts, right? So one of the studies that I was told about and is documented in one of Ellen Satter's books, this actually pops up in numerous places in her books, was a study that was done at the University of Iowa, where a doctor took a group of infants, 6 weeks old and up, and these were infants that were still only drinking formula, so they were pretty little, and he divided them into two groups, and he fed one group of babies formula that was concentrated, and another group he fed formula that was a little bit diluted. And he fed them on demand and observed their growth and how much they ate. And what the study showed very, very clearly was that these very young infants had the amazing ability to completely self-regulate their intake. So the babies that were fed diluted formula drank more ounces to get the amount of calories they needed to grow consistently. And the babies that were fed the concentrated formula took in less ounces, but got the right amount of caloric intake to grow consistently for them. So that to me was so telling. So that ability to regulate is just this inborn instinct that we all are born with. And that kind of wisdom or knowledge is very instinctual and intuitive. And it's something that if we don't mess with it, it's there for our whole lives. So even an adult can tune in to their own internal signals of I'm hungry or I'm full, and they can actually completely self-regulate and maintain a very consistent body weight for their whole lives if they don't mess with it. Unfortunately, we do mess with it by trying to diet or manipulate and change our bodies. The fact is, our bodies are genetically kind of predetermined. We're all kind of destined by our genes to have a certain height and body shape and size, and so much of that is determined by genetics that everything that we do to try to manipulate it is often futile. Usually we're made to have a certain constitution, and it's very difficult to try to change that. And so our children are born with this ability to regulate, and if we don't mess with it, it's there. And as they go through these developmental stages, they will become more aware of, oh, that sensation is hunger, or oh, I'm kind of full, I don't really want anymore. And if they are given the tools and the kind of structure that they need to allow them to develop that connection to their internal cues, they will regulate beautifully all the way till adulthood. Unfortunately, we, meaning all the adults that are around a child, not just mom and dad, but like teachers and caregivers and everyone, grandma and grandpa, we all kind of unknowingly mess with this internal regulatory system that we have. And oftentimes we do things that cause the child to lose the connection that they were born with to this internal knowledge of I'm full, I don't want any more, or I'm really hungry and I want more. So it's important to understand that. Another study that really kind of spoke to me was done down in Houston by this woman who was an anthropologist, and she tracked the growth and food intake of a little boy from 1 week of age all the way until about 9 months. And what she observed was that his intake was not consistent day to day. Some days he ate 3 or 4 times more than other days. And so his intake fluctuated, but his growth was consistent. And when he reached the stage where solid foods and baby food, was introduced, as he was getting more calories from the table food and solid food, his intake of formula decreased. And he was a completely on-demand fed baby this whole time. So he was able to regulate his intake day to day, week to week, and then as the choices of foods and even the caloric content of the different foods he was having changed, he beautifully was able to just take in more or less of various things, and his growth was consistent, and he just did it, which is really amazing, right? We are amazing creatures. So that leads me to the second part of this conversation, which is what we call pressure. So when we have a child that is picky and not eating as much as we think they should, we get stressed out. So what happens very often is when a child goes from 0 to age 1, right? They go through these phases where they're breast and bottle fed, then they get baby food, then they move through and they start eating more solid food, and they grow so much in the first year of life. And we are so focused on feeding them, and feeding them is just such a huge part of taking care of them, right? Around somewhere between 12 months and 18 months, the child's growth rate decreases quite substantially. From age 0 to 1, they like double their birth weight and they grow so much. And from age 1 to 2, that exponential growth slows quite a bit. And so their appetite is going to drop off, and that is very normal. That normal kind of decrease in growth rate, decrease in appetite, and decreased need for calories coincides with the developmental stage where a child is suddenly becoming this like terrible 2 toddler, if that's what you want to call it, but they become much more assertive of their own will, right? Now they want to choose and they like to say no, and they suddenly have an opinion of their own. So the decreased appetite, the developmental stage they're in, and then you might mix in, you can mix in any number of things, right? It could be that they have a very difficult temperament. It could be that they're very slow to warm up to things. It could be that they do have a sensory thing or an allergy or reflux or any of those other things that we've talked about. So you put all those things together, and here you have this young child who appears to mom and dad that they're not eating enough, and their pickiness and their selectiveness makes the parents feel worried. And we worry about a lot of things. We worry that they're not eating enough calories to grow. We worried about that they're underweight. We worry that they're not getting food from all the different food groups and the right nutrients. We worry about all of it, right? And that worry will lead us to react, and rightfully so. I did all of these things I'm about to mention. So we react by doing things to try to get our child to eat more. And some of those things are, we might start spoon feeding them ourselves, right? Trying to shove a couple extra spoonfuls in there, right? We might use distraction in the form of putting on a TV show or something on an iPad so that they're distracted, and then while they're not paying attention, we kind of just shovel some more food into them. We might tell them, give them some sort of bribe, like you have to eat 5 more bites of this and then you get to have a cookie or a lollipop. Most often people bribe with like a sweet or a treat. We might punish them by saying you don't get to have X, Y, and Z if you don't finish your dinner. There's like all these things that we do to try to manipulate and get our child to eat more. We also might do things that appear to be positive, right? We might do like a sticker chart. If you try these peas, you get a sticker, or whatever it is. We might just use overwhelming amounts of praise, like, oh my gosh, you ate it, you tried it. And all of those things together are all tactics that we use to try to get our children to eat more, and they all fall under this category called pressure. And pressure actually makes our children eat less, which I had no idea, right? You have these wonderful intentions and you have this anxiety as a mom and a dad that you want to get food into your child. And so you start doing all these things because you care. You care so much and you love your child so much that you do all these things because you're trying to get more nutrition into them. And unknowingly, all these things you're doing are actually probably making it worse. And when I found that out, I was like, what? And it was hard to not feel bad that I was maybe making the situation worse when all I was desperate to do was to make it better. So, the two things I want you to take away from today's video is, number one, your child has the amazing ability to regulate their intake, and they need you to trust them and respect them when they tell you that they're full or that they don't want that. It could be that they're rejecting something because it's of the sensory elements of that food or because of how it looks. Imagine if there was something that you did not want to do, like you were terrified to bungee jump or something like that. And the one person that you need and love and trust and want to please is standing there telling you have to do it and you have to jump, and they maybe even push you off. Like, that's just terrible, right? So with food, it could be that new food or that funny looking green bean or whatever it is that scary to your child, and they need you to trust and respect their choice, that they are not going to put that in their mouth or they're not going to swallow that. And so if you're here and you're doing this video and you're looking for help, you probably have been doing all of these like pressure tactics, right? And you haven't been trusting that your child is eating enough and that they're going to like choose what the right amount for them. So we're going to have to like unravel and kind of go backwards to stop the pressure, stop all of these things, positive and negative things that we're doing to try to get our child to eat. And we need to calm everything down. We need to have peaceful meals where your child gets to decide what they're going to put in their mouth, what they're going to have, and how much. You're not going to tell them that they need to have more or any of those things. And over time, and it may have taken a couple of years to get where you are now, right? It's not going to happen overnight, but over time, your child is going to start to relax, right? If someone is trying to push you to do something you don't want to do, no matter what the reason is, you are going to like put up the defenses, put up the wall, say no, and you are going to be very stressed, right? So it's going to take a while for your child to like take down the defenses and realize that you are no longer going to do this to them. You're no longer going to push food on them. You're no longer going to say all these things. You're not going to require them to eat this much before they get a cookie, blah, 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 blah. And when they realize that you mean it, you're not going to do any of those things anymore, and that you trust them, they will start to calm down. The stress level will calm down. And when the stress is lower and the anxiety is lower and everything feels happier and calmer, they're actually more likely to eat and or eat more, right? If you have a lot of anxiety and stress and angst, sometimes your tummy, you don't want food, right? So, right? And then what happens is your child's stress level comes down. They start to trust you that you're not going to do any of these pressure tactics anymore. And guess what? They get to choose to eat more on their own. And then when you see that happen, you start to trust them more. So it's like this slow unraveling. It requires patience, consistency, and time. You didn't get where you are overnight, and you're not going to like fix it overnight. But you will be amazed. Children are very resilient. You will be amazed at it. It might turn around quicker than you think. it depends on how many layers of issues your individual child actually has. So I want you to just think about that the goal here is to eventually get to a place where you have this trusting relationship, where your child trusts you to do your jobs and to feed them well, and you trust them that they have the knowledge and the ability to step up and do their job to feed themselves, and that you're in this together. It's not a fight, it's not a power struggle. It doesn't have to have drama. And you understand that all these pressure things that you've been doing them out of your own feelings of anxiety and care for your child. And now you're going to step back and you're going to say, okay, I'm not going to do those things to you anymore. I'm not going to pressure you anymore. And I'm going to let you decide how much you want to have. And I'm going to let you decide when you're full. So think about that. If you are having some family meals together, try to turn the TV off, have a nice conversation. Don't say anything about what your child is eating. If she doesn't want to have something or he doesn't like it, not a big deal. And you also know your child so well that you know what their favorite things are. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Serve things that your child is really comfortable with right now. Serve things like, make sure there's always something that you're offering that you know they really like. And if you're making dinner, for example, and you have a bunch of things on the table, make sure that there's something there that you know your child likes. Include it as part of the meal, like a buffet, and let them eat as much as they want of it, and just don't say anything. And that's where I would suggest you start. In my next video, I'm going to dive deeper into how to actually do this, like really concrete steps that you can take to implement this this structure and consistent delivery of your job that I keep talking about. So that's coming in the next video. All right, take care.